So this lesson is on graphing quadratic functions. First thing you need to know is how to tell if it is a quadratic. And the way that you're going to tell is if it has that x squared. If it has that x squared, that's how you know it's a quadratic. Okay? The next thing you need to know is how to figure out a, b, and c, because we're going to use those a lot. So let's do an example. What if I gave you 2x squared minus 4x plus 9? We need to know what a is, what b is, and what c is. So a, if you look at the problem, is whatever is with x squared. So here my a is going to be a 2. B is whatever is with x. Well, in here, you're going to include that negative, that minus. B is going to be negative 4. C is your number at the end, which is a 9. Let's do another one. What about x squared minus 5? Let's figure out what a is, what b is, and what c is. So for this one, there's no number in front of the x squared, but remember there's really a 1 if they don't put anything. So a is going to be 1. B is the x. Well, this one does not have just an x by itself, which means your b is going to be 0. C is the number at the end, and again, you want to include the sign, so it's going to be a negative 5. Okay, so now that you know how to find a, b, and c, I need you to write down everything that you see here, how to find the axis of symmetry, the vertex, and then what happens if a is positive or negative. So pause it and write this down. All right, hopefully you wrote it down. This is your formula for axis of symmetry. Your vertex is always going to be an ordered pair. And whatever you found for your axis of symmetry, that's going to be the x number. And then to find this y number, you're going to plug whatever your axis of symmetry is into the equation. And I'll explain what that means in a little bit. And then the last two, if a is positive, it opens up, which means it would look like this. A parabola that opens up, which means this vertex is going to be a minimum because it's at the very bottom. If a is negative, that means it's going to open down, which means this vertex is going to be at the very top and make it a maximum. You do need to know that if it's a minimum or a maximum. So let's get into some problems. First thing I want to figure out is what a is, what b is, and what c is. So a, there's no number there, it's really a 1. B is with the x, so it's a negative 4. And c is a 9. So there's my a, b, and c. To find my axis of symmetry, the formula is negative b over 2a. So I'm going to plug in negative 4, because b is negative 4, divided by 2 times a, and a is 1. Well, on top, a negative is really a positive 4. And on bottom, 2 times 1 is 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. So the way you write your axis of symmetry is always going to be an x. So it's an x equals 2. That is your axis of symmetry. Now that we found it, let's talk about what in the world is it. Your axis of symmetry is an imaginary line that's going to cut your parabola in half. Okay? So this parabola will be cut in half at x equals 2. So there's your imaginary line. That's going to cut it in half. Let's find our vertex. Well, remember we said our vertex, your axis of symmetry is that first number. So 2 is going to be the first number. To figure out the next number, we need to plug 2 into this equation up here. So every time I see an x, I'm going to plug in a 2. So it's going to be 2 squared minus 4 times 2 plus 9. You can type that in your calculator, do whatever you need to do. I'm going to do the calculator. Actually, I'm just going to do it. 2 squared is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. Negative 8 plus 9 is 1. And 4 plus 1 is 5. So my vertex is at 2, 5. That means I'm going to put a dot over 2, up 5. That's going to be my vertex. All right, since A is positive, it's a positive 1. That means it's going to be concave up. It's going to open up, which means this vertex is going to be a minimum. That's going to be a minimum. And then the last thing you really need to know is the y-intercept. And the y-intercept is whatever C is. So in this problem, C is 9. So my y-intercept is at 9. It's an ordered pair, so it's really at 0, 9. So my y-axis, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I have a dot there at 9. To get another dot, just to make it easier to draw, I'm going to reflect that over my axis of symmetry. Let me show you. See, I knew there was 1, 2 before I got to the line, so I go 1, 2 after the line. So these dots would connect like this, and that would be my graph. All right, let's do another one. Again, let's start with what's A, what's B, and what's C. A is going to be -2, B is going to be 8, C is going to be -3. So let's start with our axis of symmetry. Negative B over 2A, so it's going to be -8 over 2 times -2. Well, a negative divided by negative is a positive. So -8 divided by -4 is 2. So my axis of symmetry is at x equals 2. So there's an invisible line right here at x equals 2 that's going to cut my parabola in half. The vertex, to find the vertex, remember your axis of symmetry is your first number, and then to find the other numbers, we're going to plug it in. Oh, instead of an x, that should be, I'm plugging in a 2. Positive 2. So this is 2 squared is 4, times -2 is -8. 8 times 2 is 16. -8 plus 16 is 8. 8 minus 3 is 5. Which randomly is exactly what we got last time. It's not always going to be like that. So over 2 of 5, that's my vertex. This time, because A is negative, that means it's going to open down, which means that's going to be a maximum. And then my y-intercept is going to be my C, and C is at -3. But again, we want to write that as an ordered pair. It's going to be at 0, -3, down here. And again, just to get another point to make it a little easier to graph, I'm going to reflect that over my axis of symmetry. So this is what this parabola will look like. Let's do another one. Here, A, B, C. A is -5. There is no x, so B is 0. There is no C, so C is 0. So your axis of symmetry would be -0 over 2 times A. Well, 0 divided by anything is still just 0. So my axis of symmetry is at x equals 0. Find my vertex. That's my first number, and I would plug it into my equation. So -5 times 0 squared. It's still going to be 0. That's my vertex. It is, my A is negative, which means it's going to open down, which means this is going to be a maximum. And my y-intercept is also at 0. So that would be the order pair 0, 0. So this really helps me none at all. I know this cuts it in half. I know my vertex is at 0. I know it's going to open down. So just sketch something like that. One more. Here, let's figure out A, B, and C. A is 3. There is no B. C is -9. Your axis of symmetry is -B over 2A. So it's just going to be 0. So my vertex is going to be at 0. If I plugged it in, 3 times 0 squared minus 9. Well, 3 times 0 squared is 0. So 0, -9 is my vertex. So 0, 1, 2, 4. Down here, that's my vertex. Because A is positive, it's going to open up, which means it's going to be a minimum. And my y-intercept is also at -9. So that would be at 0, -9. So this parabola is going to look something like that. So if you will go try the worksheet 3.1 and let me know if you need help.